Welcome to our membership Q&A, and today we're delighted to have Diane Capelthorne with us. Diane is the Head of Business Development for the Towergate Caring Professions Division, so a very knowledgeable person when it comes to all things insurance. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
You're going to be talking to us today a bit about insurance and also sort of post-pandemic, where we are working face-to-face and virtually now, and also you're going to touch upon cybercrime. So I'm going to hand over to you, and we look forward to this.
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to join you today. As Karen has just said, I am Head of Business Development for Towergate Caring Professions. We have been established for over 30 years, looking after many individuals, companies, partnerships and charities. I am responsible for about 90 relationships currently, and have been looking after members across the pandemic and before. My background is that I've done 20 years plus in insurance, and prior to that I was actually working for one of the high street banks. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some information that you'll find useful this afternoon, but obviously very keen to have any questions that you may have following or during the presentation this afternoon. So moving on then, why do you need insurance in the first place? Liability cover provides protection for you, the policyholder, against legal liabilities that could arise. Those liabilities could be unknowingly breach of professional code of conduct, you give incorrect advice, a client could complain about a service that you have provided to either a professional or regulatory body. One of your clients could injure themselves whilst either coming to see you, either in your own home or potentially in a third-party environment. A competitor could accuse you of making false or slanderous allegations. You could have a dispute with a client over monies that they owe you. And HMRC may carry out an inquiry into your tax affairs. All of those things that I have just spoken about are covered by your liability policy. That's not exclusive across every liability policy, so I would encourage you, if there's anything that I have just mentioned there that you think actually that would be a real benefit to me, to actually check your own policy schedule to make sure that you are covered for that. Employer's liability is a separate policy. It is compulsory if you do employ people. And if you do, then obviously we can actually provide that in the quotation that we provide you under your liability cover. That's a very brief synopsis of what the liability cover provides. I think it's really important now to talk to you about some of the changes that have come into effect as a result of the pandemic and the things that are beginning to come out in the new normal that people are actually asking us about. Remote working is certainly something that has been very key for a lot of people during the pandemic, with people working remotely and in some instances having to cease working because clients don't want to see them. Our policies do absolutely cover you for remote working, providing you're adhering to government guidelines. Then in the event of a claim, the policy would act for you in exactly the same way as it would as if you were seeing your client face to face. It's really important that you do look at your insurance policy to make sure that you have got that cover. A lot of policies made extensions to allow remote working during the pandemic, during lockdowns, during the tiered system, and that's not necessarily been written into the policy as business as usual. But with Towergate policy, you will find that that has been covered.
So Diane,
yes.
Can I just cut in there? I think that's a really interesting point that you're saying about remote working may not be covered under somebody's normal insurance, because I know a lot of our members, certainly are continuing to work in a remote environment, and a lot of training is now taking place in a remote environment or in a hybrid environment, hybrid being the new key word. So it sounds like it's really important that everybody checks their insurance to ensure that they're covered.
Or check with your insurer if you're not sure from looking at your policy wording, or you can't find your policy schedule to hand. I absolutely would encourage you to do it, because obviously in the event of a claim and you're not covered, that's the wrong time to be finding out It's much better to be finding out at the outset as to what your policy is actually covering you for.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really key, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And also sort of the terms about, if you can work from home, you should work from home. And we're hearing now that the government are potentially bringing that in again in October, November time. It's important at that time to check with the insurer to see what their interpretation of that is, because that probably does mean that face-to-face working is not really permitted. In some circumstances during lockdown, there were certain instances where face-to-face work, where it was deemed to be absolutely critical, was allowed, and it would have been covered. But again, it's better not to work on the basis that it is covered rather than it's not covered, and check before you do it. That would be my steer, certainly.
Definitely.
From a Towergate perspective, we have throughout the pandemic, and hopefully some of you have had access to this, had a hub which is called Towergate COVID-19 Updates. We intend to continue that throughout the rest of 2021 and potentially into next year, depending on how things map out. But that hub actually gives you a wealth of information around what you can and what you can't do. It talks about government guidelines and breaks it down into very plain, simple English, so that it's quite easy to understand what is due and what isn't doable. It's also got information on there around health and safety, and I know that's been a real key issue for a lot of people, particularly when working in other people's homes or in a third-party environments. Working in other people's homes, providing government guidelines say that you must adhere to those guidelines, and they are quite prescriptive as to what you need to be doing. We have a series of health and safety questionnaires that you can actually complete prior to doing a face-to-face visit to make sure that not just yourself but also your client is happy for you to be visiting them. Very basic things that you would probably think of, but perhaps not in its entirety. So whilst the questions look quite lengthy, they're actually end to end, and if you can tick an answer happily that you can adhere to all of those, then yes, you're fine to work. If you do complete one of the assessments and you actually think, I'm not really sure whether I'm meeting that guideline doing X and Y, we do have health and safety experts on hand to speak to you, to talk you through what revisions you might need to make to your current procedures, what adaptations you can make to your processes to make sure that you are adhering to them. And I would just stipulate that these health and safety assessments are not a requirement of the insurance policy in the event of a claim. But obviously, if you did have a claim made against you that was COVID related, and you did have documentary evidence to support what you had done to protect yourself and your client prior to that visit, that would all help towards the claim, but it is not mandatory, and I do want to stress that. However, I would suggest that if you haven't had the opportunity to have a look at the risk assessments and you are working in people's homes either now or planning to do so in the future, just take a look, and if you've got sort of half an hour to go through it, it's well worth a look. We've had some really, really good feedback from people who have thought about quite a few of the items that are detailed and then thought, I would never have thought about this, but actually thank you for doing it. So just go on there and have a little look-see and see what might be there for you. There's a lot of information also around employment law, basic information around the furlough scheme when it was available, if any sort of guidelines about being able to claim for the self-employed come out, they will also appear on that hub. When you get the slide deck following the presentation this afternoon, it will include links to all of this, but if you do have any questions, I know at the end of this session, Karen is actually going to send around some information about how you can actually contact and put some direct questions in if you have them. Has anybody on the call this afternoon got any questions so far?
I can't see anybody else, so I don't know.
No? Good. Okay.
Guys, do you want to make yourself so we can see you just for a minute in case you do have questions? Because I've got a question if nobody else has. Amanda, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment, no.
Cash, we can't hear you, on mute.
I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. Public liability
Yes.
insurance. If you're doing on-site training on a client site or in a hotel or a room that you've hired, should you have public liability insurance, or is it the responsibility of the place where you're training?
We would always say that you should have it. The venue where you are actually hosting the event from should also have it, but it is important to make sure that you've got it. And if you haven't had sight of the company's certificate to say that they have got it, absolutely you should have it.
Okay, thank you for that.
So I have a question about the employer's liability that you mentioned earlier as well. So is employer's liability, because we've been given different advice, that employer's liability is it just for employees, i.e. people who are on PAYE, or is it for anybody that you are potentially working with? So if you're working with freelancers or co-trainers or something like
volunteers, yeah, anybody that you're actually working with would be covered under your employer's liability. You would have liability responsibilities. So it isn't just people who are PAYE, it can be volunteers, it can be people that you've got on sort of short-term contracts. They would all fall under that and could make a claim under your PL policy.
That's what I was checking, because of the conference we initially sort of found that out. But I think that's quite important, because I don't think people necessarily understand that or realise that when they're when you think you're working with freelancers or you're just working with a mate or something like that. Yeah. It's actually quite important to still have cover.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, thank you. So there is another question at this stage. We've had a question come in from Andy Coley, who says, oh no, I'll leave Andy's till later, because actually this one's possibly more relevant to what you've just been talking about. So Fiona White has said that she's keen to learn what might be the pitfalls, insurance-wise, of seeing clients in her own home here in the UK.
Seeing people in your own home is the same really as visiting them in their homes. So you should be completing that risk assessment and really looking at it to make sure that you're adhering to those guidelines, because it's still the same. You're still effectively with that client is in a third party environment really. So therefore you should be making sure that both the practitioner and the client feels comfortable in the environment that they're in. And again, obviously the changes to the risk assessments do sort of reflect social distancing, PPE, and all of the things that we've all heard about over the last 12-18 months, but actually sometimes only pick out one part of that, and actually it's an end-to-end process. So what I would say to that is, if you are doing assessments in your own home, make sure that you have done the risk assessment, and once you've completed it in your own home, the chances are you'll only need to do it once, because actually you know your environments. So if unless you've got any extenuating circumstances, perhaps you've got people who are in a vulnerable situation whereby you'd want to take extra precautions, but if it's just a standard consultation and you've completed that RA, then really and truthfully that should suffice.
So if you've got people visiting you at home, presumably the Towergate, the professional insurance we're taking out as NLP professionals, that covers us for all sorts of things, as you said at the beginning. But what happens, if people are working from home, do they also need to ensure that their house insurance covers them for having clients visit their home, or is it all covered under the Towergate policy?
The liability aspect is all covered under the Towergate policy. Obviously, things like accidental damage to items in the home, that would come under your home policy. Goods generally stored as part of a business would not be covered under a general home policy. You would need to have an extension to that. There are some home policies out there that would cover that, but a standard buildings and contents policy wouldn't be, because it's a personal situation, and therefore if you did have sort of goods that you wanted covered, probably not so much in this instance, but we do have some practitioners that have for things that they need to store in garages and that, which they wouldn't have done previously. You should notify your insurers of that aspect.
Okay,
And indeed, if you are having people into your home, you know, if someone slips or trips in your home and makes a claim against you, again, they should be aware that you are actually working from home. So it's different working from home, where it's just you working from home, working virtually, because obviously you are the insured living in your own domain. But where you've got members of the public coming in, you have to consider that they could make a claim if they trip over the mat in the hall or trip over the dog, or whatever that happens to be. They could make a claim against you.
Right, and that if they do,
that would be covered under the liability policy.
That's what I was going to say. So if they do trip over the mat or the dog, then it's a home insurance
Yes.
claim rather than a Towergate liability claim. Okay,
Yes.
Good to know. Thank you.
That's
Does
okay.
anybody have any other questions at this stage? No. Please carry on.
Okay, so I'm going to move on now to start to talk about a very hot topic for all the wrong reasons, really, and that's really a cyber awareness session that I'm going to just give you some highlights this afternoon of some of the things that we have seen during the pandemic that have really risen to proportions that were not seen previously, and they're not really beginning to rescind as we start to get into the sort of new normal in inverted commas. It's a sad a fact to say that the UK is now the 4th ranked country in terms of cyber attacks. So it's not the best league table to be, nearly the top of. People suspected that they had been the target of phishing attacks during the pandemic, and 25% of small businesses had also been affected.
Sorry, Diane, can you just repeat those statistics? Because I don't know if you just froze for me or you might have frozen for the recording as well, but I missed the statistics.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, so 42% of people suspected that they had been the target of phishing attacks during the pandemic, and 25% of small businesses. That's a very high percentage.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to talk through some of the different forms of cybercrime that we have seen. These are the top ones. That's certainly not unlimited, and this is not meant to be scaremongering. This is really just to raise awareness of things that you should be considering when you're actually using your personal devices. And one of the main reasons why cybercrime has increased during the pandemic is the multi-usage of devices, people using their device for home use, for personal use, and indeed while there was homeschooling, for homeschooling as well. So it was a hacker's paradise, really. But unfortunately, what we have seen is there's quite a few new different types of cyber attacks that are hitting the small self-employed person. You will always hear about the corporate entities that have cyber attacks and are held to ransom because they make the media news. Unfortunately, the smaller crimes don't do that, so that's why it's important that we're aware of them, and there is no 100% full safe way of actually protecting yourself against them, but at least having an awareness hopefully will help. Cyber criminals use fake emails and they make calls like the mask as someone they're not actually are. I'm sure that a lot of you will have seen things from HMRC by email. BT is another one that is used a lot for emails. More and more now, text messages are being used saying that you've had a parcel delivered and they've not been able to deliver it. The postage hasn't been paid on it. Click on this link. All of that is, as soon as you've clicked on it, it's a hacker's paradise because they've got the information they want. They've actually sending that out to you. So to delete those without opening them is the best course of action. Not always easy because a lot of them are very, very good. You know, a lot of them you will read, you look at the branding and you think it looks right. It's only when you start to read the wording you realise that actually it hasn't come from a corporate entity. A lot of them where they say hello and the English isn't very good or their punctuation's not very good. But actually when you're really busy, it's really quick to look and say, I've had an email from BT, my bill's ready, I'm just going to click on it. And actually at that point, it is too late. So that is something to be very aware of. It happens daily, and we get daily reports of that coming in all the time. Phishing emails which purport to be from reputable companies, such as the government. There's quite a lot saying you're due tax refunds going out at the moment, saying if you click here, you'll be told how much money is due to you. And people who have completed tax returns very often think, well, I gave my email on my tax return, so therefore it must be a pucker response. Absolutely be really, really careful about those because Fire hijacker is something that is quite scary, and I was actually on a course the other day where they were showing how this happens, and this is where criminals gain access to files and then they hold the owner to ransom. And you sometimes think, well, holding the owners to ransom, why are they going to do that? Well, they're going to do it because they want information. It might be that they have actually taken, if you're storing your client's bank details on your system, they may well have got that information. They want to get more from you. So it's really important that if they do ask you for money, even if you pay that sum over, the chances are they will use that data. So to protect yourself against that is really, really key. We have had some instances where people have had data taken off of systems, and it's then been used on social media, which has been a really bad PR experience for the practitioners to actually recover from. It's not their fault necessarily, but if you are a client of that practitioner, you may well feel very badly towards them, the fact that your information has gone into the public domain from that source. Key logging is something else which is quite key. Criminals record what's being typed on your individual keyboard, which can then give away important information to your passwords. So that's really important when you're setting your passwords, that you don't set the name of the dog, the cat, the child, using your date of birth, using anything that criminals can actually try and think, well, yes, they know your date of birth, so they're just going to use a different configuration. A lot of sites now allow you to let them select the passwords, and I know they're not always particularly user-friendly, but they are much harder to actually hack into. So again, I'd be very keen to suggest that you look at those and see what else you might have that would help you in that situation, because once someone has got your password, they've actually got access to the whole of your system. The other thing is to make sure that you change your passwords regularly, and you change your passwords across different disciplines. So don't keep the same passwords on your phone and on your device, because then you're just opening up a whole world of crime, really, for people, and making it very easy for them to get into it. We do, well, all insurers do have cyber policies which can help protect you and help restore your information in the event of attack. There are various levels of cover that you can take. We have a team here in Towergate that will be very happy to talk to you about the levels of cover that are relevant to you as an individual. And you can also talk through exactly what precautions you've got protecting your firewall and all of that sort of thing at the moment. And then they can talk about the levels of cover that can be offered. One of the most important things is that in the event that you are aware that you have had a cyber attack, is that you do need to advise people very, very quickly that this has happened. And if you have cyber cover in place, we have a team of specialists that will actually help you do that. They will send out the relevant information to third parties to tell them that if they get requests for monies, for payments, not to make them because you have been a subject of a cyber attack. They'll also help to restore the data back onto your system, because the likelihood is you're not going to be able to access that data on your system, but they will be able to do that. And you can actually buy the number of hours support that you want. I think the minimum currently is around 12 hours of support, and it has to be within, and you have to report it within 8 hours if you've been aware that you have been the victim of a cyber attack. There is now, and again this will be in the slide deck that comes out to you, there is a government site to report phishing attacks that you're aware of. I've included that information in the slide deck for you. The government headquarters set this up specifically for people to report instances, and as long as you have actually reported it, then you are actually covered, but you are required to actually make that declaration as soon as you are aware that you have been the victim of a cyber attack and potentially personal records may have been taken. There's 3 things that we say about cyber. And if you walked around my cyber team this afternoon, you would see these posters up everywhere that says stop, challenge and protect. And they're the 3 strongest words, really. Stop and think about what you're opening, what you're actually replying to. Challenge it. Challenge yourself. Is this right? and then think about what protection you might need. Think about the situation that perhaps someone does get into your system. What information would be readily available to them? Is there any backup for that? What support would you need? How much time would that take someone who is a professional to help you? We've seen individuals really try to recover their data themselves, recover their devices, and it really is quite a hard journey if you've actually been the victim of a cyber attack and you don't have any support, because suddenly you're out there on your own, and it can be quite a cold place to be, unfortunately. If anyone following, like listening to some of that this afternoon, thinks, oh, actually, I'm a little bit concerned, please do get in contact with me and I will get one of our cyber team to talk to you. Absolutely, you are not committed to buy a cyber policy. This is information service. There's a lot about cybercrime on the COVID-19 hub that I referenced when we were talking about the liability policy, and that is updated with sort of updates about frequently reported incidences, so it's quite useful to have a look at that and see what the common themes are at any given time, and they do change quite regularly. Okay, so that really was the information that I wanted to share with you this afternoon. If you have any questions, I'm delighted to answer them. If not, again, feel free to email me, and obviously we will come back out to you. If you want any of my cyber team to contact you, let us know. If you want any information about your liability policy, either your current policy, whether it be a Towergate policy or somewhere else, absolutely fine. We can talk to you about sort of levels of indemnity, all the things that come with your policy that sometimes we take for granted because we renew our policy year on year. But perhaps this is a time now where we are starting to venture into a bit of a new way of working for a lot of people. Perhaps at the time where you're taking out either a new policy or renewing your policy, it's just good to have a double check to see where you are.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Diane. I've got a couple of questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
I think one of my questions may tie in one of your questions, Karen, so I'll let you go first, if that's all
right. Mind reading now.
I was going to say, mind reading, I'm impressed.
Yeah, me too. Well, I do have two questions about this whole cyber panic. The cyber policies, do they cover things like with GDPR as well?
Yes.
Does that come as part of the policy? So if inadvertently we were to break the GDPR regulations, would that
as a result of a cyber attack, then yes, obviously the cyber team would be able to come in and advise you as to what you needed to do to comply with the law. Obviously outside of an actual cyber attack, no. Okay. But yes, absolutely, if it was part of a criminal activity, yes.
And the my other question was about the government website that you were talking about, where you said about reporting. Is that reporting if you receive what you think is a phishing email, or is that reporting if you go and click on it and then realise it was a phishing email when it's too late?
Yes, the latter, Karen. Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's super.
If you do receive a phishing email, I mean, for the likes of sort of Amazon and BT, if you phone them and tell them, they're always very pleased to have that information because they can try and trace where the source has come from. And obviously, the more people that do that, the more chances are that they're actually going to find out the source of it. And sometimes these corporate bodies do put out messages to say, be careful if you do receive unsolicited emails. It's just thinking about sort of timings for it. I know that I personally get lots from BT telling me my bill's due, but actually I know my bill's nowhere near due, so I never open them. But actually it is quite easy to do that if you're just in a hurry and you're sitting on a train and you think, oh, I'll just do that and sort this out, and then suddenly you've opened up a sort of whole can of worms, really.
And does the cybercrime also cover phone calls then?
No, it doesn't. This is purely cyber attacks on devices.
Yeah, on devices.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think just to add on that, on the the bills not being due, etc., there are an awful lot of we get an awful lot of phishing emails for your password has expired.
Yes, yeah.
Please click on this. I think the telltale sign for me is always, is it a bona fide address? That the Microsoft.com or whatever the company is. If it's not, then it's likely not to be from that company in the first place.
And also, as Diane said, the spelling, because I think I don't know about the rest of the team, but I've noticed quite a big increase in those Microsoft ones recently, and I kind of looked at the first one and thought, oh, and then realised that actually they'd spelt some really key simple words incorrectly, and I thought, that's not right, that's not going to happen. So yeah, but it's just that awareness, isn't it? I do have another question from one of our members. So Andy Coley has asked the question, what do we need to consider if we're working in other territories, such as the USA? Now, I'm assuming he means working virtually in other territories. So let's make that assumption first of all.
It would absolutely have to be virtually, because that's how we would only cover people that work virtually. Obviously, if you are working in other countries, for a client's perspective, in the event of a claim, UK law would apply. So to any claim, it would be UK law that would be applied to it, irrespective of where that client was actually living.
Right. Okay. So therefore, if the person doing the work, the insured, is based in the UK when they're doing their consultations or training or whatever it is, as long as they are based in the UK, then the Towergate policy will cover them.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Okay.
And my question was on the back of that. If they do operate in other countries, what can they do what can they get from Towergate?
At this moment in time, we don't offer a policy. We are actually looking to hopefully roll that out. It won't be this year, it may be Q1 next year. But actually, the information we would say is look for a local broker in the country that you're going to be working for. Make sure that they are registered as you would if you were looking for any broker in the UK, to make sure they're reputable, and then you would utilise their services.
And our experience, I mean, it may or may not be the right experience, but is it fair to say that not all countries necessarily have cover for things like this, for practitioners in the caring professions and that sort of thing? Because I know that's a question we get sometimes.
Yeah, not everywhere will do. I mean, the majority of countries absolutely will have. There will be some that won't. It's obviously then down to the practitioner as to what they want to do, whether they actually want to work with clients in that area, and we really couldn't give advice on that.
Yeah. Okay. Superb. Does anybody have any more questions?
I don't have a question, but I just elaborating on the cybercrime information that Dan was talking about. I think people also need to be more aware of social media, as you were saying, Diane, because actually now a lot of people, rather than emails, they will get people through Facebook. There are a lot of I used to work in a fraud team, so that's why I thought I'd share some knowledge that I used to deal with. People are answering all these quizzes on Facebook, and people are getting information from those quizzes. They think, oh, let's answer this quiz and send it out to everybody. Now you answer it. What's your favourite colour? Where were you born? Name a memorable place. All these quizzes. And of course, it's a lovely way of people gathering information on other people. So I think Facebook is a real hive for it at the moment, and other social media platforms. They're obviously major for it, and I think that's something people really should be aware of. You know, why are you answering these quizzes on Facebook? Does everybody need to know that information about you? Because surely that could be a password, or it could be something that's relevant to something that then people can hack with. So it's just another point to add to your social media information.
Absolutely. So thank you. If we have no more questions, if anybody, we'll be putting this will be on Facebook. So if anybody does have any questions, please do post them underneath in the Facebook post once it's live. We'll keep an eye on that over the next few weeks, and we'll send any questions that arise. We'll send them on to you, Diane. Diane is also, as she mentioned during the conversation, she's going to send out a slide deck which we will will make available, and we'll also be putting a recording of this onto our website, and we'll make the slide deck available as a link on the website as well. So as I said, anybody who does have any questions, please do just post them in the chat, and we'll pick those up at some point and pass them on to Diane. So Diane, thank you so much for a whirlwind tour of things we need to be aware of, and I think it's so important that we do stay informed about things like this, because with everything changing so quickly at the moment, it's brilliant that Towergate are keeping abreast of that and providing that valuable resource for the rest of us. So thank you so much for informing us today, and we really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.